Hello, marhaba. My name is Tamara Ryan. I and David Gamba will be presenting on behalf of our co-authors, Qadir Awad and Lavinia Dunnigan. Our paper is entitled Collective Memory and Narrative Cohesion, a computational study of Palestinian refugee oral histories in Lebanon. Next slide, please. The memory of the Nakba is central to Palestinian national identity, especially among refugees in Lebanon who face marginalization and denial of basic rights. Our paper examines whether Palestinian refugees in Lebanon maintain a cohesive collective memory of the Nakba, despite being separated from their homeland, given their unique social and political context. Next slide, please. In our paper, we seek to answer the following research questions. Do Palestinian refugee groups in Lebanon, physically isolated from their homeland, maintain cohesive collective memory formation in their remembrance of the Nakba? And if so, what are the indicators of similarity in their narratives? To address this, we use the Palestinian Oral History Archive, POHA, and apply natural language processing to analyze and compare narratives in its collection. Oral narratives offer a rich understanding of the Nakba, revealing how individuals' unique experiences shape their memories, often influenced by their economic, social, and political locations. Most notably, this gives insight into the histories of women and refugees who are often absent from official archives. However, analyzing Arabic oral histories, especially in audiovisual formats, poses challenges for computational methods due to their non-textual nature. But recent advances in NLP are particularly well suited for archival collections due to their ability to extract key themes, entities, and narrative structures from such data, even in Arabic. Our paper makes several contributions. We introduce NLP as a valuable tool for medium to large scale analysis of Palestinian Nakba narratives. And in doing so, we complement the findings of existing interpretive studies that have analyzed refugee narratives on a smaller scale. By analyzing over 700 hours of narratives documented within POHA, which represent more than 50 cities and refugee camps in Lebanon, we're able to analyze and compare narratives on a much larger scale. In doing so, our main findings show that sharing identity markers is a strong indicator of higher similarity in refugee narratives. Moving on to the theoretical framework. We build upon the theoretical framework of group memory or collective memory because it outlines how individual memories are co-constructed through external social relations. Group memory was first theorized by Maurice Halbwachs, and the theory states that individuals retrieve memories in alignment with the logic of the group to which they belong. However, this phenomenon only holds when the group is strongly established, long-lasting, and able to resist external modes of thinking. If a group is exposed to enough outside beliefs or new members, cohesion can be interrupted. Within the refugee and Palestinian context, prior scholarship has analyzed how groups form based on geographical location, such as refugees, exiles, or the internally displaced, gender, age group, class, and tribe. Within this study, though, we focus on gender and geography specifically for the following reasons. In terms of geography, before the Nakba, Palestinian society was characterized by village-based kinship structures, meaning that identity was defined more strongly at the village level, not the national level. Therefore, we predict that a refugee's place of origin remains significant even after they have been displaced from it. As well, since the Nakba, refugee camps have been isolated from the broader Lebanese public and the Palestinian homeland, developing insular social and cultural cohesion as a community. Therefore, we predict that a place of residence after the Nakba will also impact group identity and memory. Prior scholarship has also established that Palestinian women exhibit their own gendered memory of the Nakba. Palestinian women's traditional role in maintaining social relations, including family and local histories, has caused them to focus on the following topics: domestic practices, cultural traditions, community life, and alternative modes of resistance. Therefore, we predict that gender will also have an impact on narrative and memory. Using this theoretical framework, we test the cohesiveness of the memories of Palestinians that have formed groups within Lebanon. We expect that refugees' boundary-making identity markers will reflect higher cohesion in their narratives. In other words, we're performing an empirical test of group memories. Specifically, we have two hypotheses. The first, interviewees belonging to the same spatial group will be associated with increased cohesion in their narratives. And the second, Same interview gender would be associated with increased cohesion in narratives, more so than across genders. And then I'll pass it to my colleague, David.
Thank you. So I'm going to discuss data and methods and results. But give me a second. So moving on with data, the source that we use is the Palestinian Oral History Archive. I know many people here will be familiar with this source, so suffice, I'm not going into the great detail of describing it, but suffice to say, it contains interviews with live narratives of refugees living in Lebanon. And for our hypothesis, for the purpose of testing this hypothesis, through the metadata and actual data, the interviews, we can extract both the identity markers as well as the narratives in order to test our hypothesis. So for metadata, we can extract the gender, place of origins, and place of residence. For metadata, when we discuss narratives, we have this very rich like sort of metadata that describes, for example, keywords, which are sort of like a thematic description of the whole interview. Then we also have families, figures, and landmarks. And very importantly, we also have things such as a table of contents in the metadata, which is very useful because the other part, which is the actual interview, uh, essentially also the narrative that we are very interested in, and it also contains entities. This is an audiovisual archive, so what we did in order to be able to process it with NLP techniques is to transcribe it, but we're using an Arabic transcription, and we also are going to split it by themes. Why is this important? Because the interviews themselves are very detail rich. They're extensive, varied in content. So they will have life narratives. So we will have, for example, from the childhood experiences, weddings, socioeconomic conditions before and after the Nakba, as well as all the like events that the person lived through the Nakba and after that. Um, so for that, we did a partition by themes with the help of the table of contents. Maybe I'm not gonna go into detail right now, but maybe we can discuss in the after the presentation is complete. Suffice to say also, there are 4 particular themes. So this is the list of themes that we ended up kind of compiling these different excerpts of the transcript. So particular transcripts will be related, for example, to Zionist attacks. What we do is focus on 4 particular ones, these ones that are highlighted, that are both prevalent in data, but also are more related to the kind of the Nakba itself. But with that in mind, so with this data in mind, how do we say 2 narratives are cohesive? We will be using textual similarity as a proxy for cohesion, and we'll be looking at different angles or aspects. So for example, when we have the metadata, we have the keywords, the thematic description, broad thematic description of the interview. We'll use a TF-IDF representation to transform these keywords into vectors. And with these vectors, we kind of compare the vectors and see if they are highly similar or not. Similarly, we do for landmarks, figures, and families. When we talk about the actual interviews, content of transcripts, we also do 2 things. We extract more broad entities. So this through NER, we extract entities, which then we use also TF-IDF to transform into vectors. And then particularly for the excerpts by theme, we also use embeddings of a large language models. In this case, the text embedding 3 large language models by OpenAI. And here we have a picture of how this works. So we will have 2 interviews, extract the transcript, and remember that this will be by theme. Then we pass it through an LLM, which will generate a vector representation. We compare these 2 vectors through a similarity measure. And we use this as a proxy for cohesiveness of the narrative. And how we do it when we have, for example, this matrix with giving all the interviews, how similar they are, for example, in a particular theme. So we will be use mixed models for contrasting, for kind of measuring on average this cohesion. We're comparing all pairs of interviews where similarity is the dependent variable. And then we use the identity markers as independent variables. So we'll be trying to see how much the gender, like 2 interviews having the same gender predicts the similarity. We also incorporate, like it's more technical, but incorporate random effects, cross random effects, as an interview can appear in multiple pairs. And we'll be doing 1 model for each of the aspects, location, and also for example, thematic keywords or particular themes with the semantic embeddings. So let's move on to actually the results. And starting by looking at cohesion on origin and place of origin and residence. So here is the actual model that we used. Here, just to highlight that the thing of the coefficients of interest are the fixed effect, indicate a fixed effect where if the interviews share a place of origin, if they share a place of residence, and there is also an interaction term that tells us if they share both. And again, we will be doing one model for each aspect: keywords, locations, families, and each of the themes. So yeah, this is, so here, finally we get to the results. Let's look at first by all the things that have to do with like entities and also themes are described by the keywords. Here we see the results in general when we look at if two interviews share the same origin, they are more similar on average, with the similarity across like looking at keywords and our entities, in particular also for landmarks. When we look at same residents, we also observe an effect, oftentimes like even stronger. Again, by keywords, here like across the board in these particular measures of similarity. And then when interviews share both the same origin and place of residence, so these narratives share the place of origins and residence, we also observe like a boost to their similarity. So in general, this is, we interpret this as a strong evidence for the hypothesis one, where we have like interviews will be more similar across shared place of origin or shared geographical location of the communities. Interestingly also, this is also that also verifies with when we look at when we dive into the semantic similarity, looking by theme. So again, we see same place of origin, same place of residence, and in particular, when they share both, we also observe like a increase in the similarity. Again, bringing a strong evidence for hypothesis one. Now let's look at gender. This again, we use very similar model, again, a fixed effect that would indicate essentially three conditions. If the two interviews are both from men, from women, or if they are from a men and women. And again, we're essentially seeing something very similar in how we approach it. Here, we observe through the results that women tend to be more cohesive than men, although as you see, the variability in these estimates is much higher. So the similarities are more or less all across the board. And in particular, there's something that we note is that more than, for example, okay, we observe women, when we have two interviews and they're both from women, they're more similar on average. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but what happens is that males are more dissimilar than on average. It's indicating that, for example, something like when we look at broad themes, whereas females are not more similar than on average, because here the results are insignificant. We observe that males are more dissimilar on average. This is interesting. When we look at general entities, we observe a pattern where women are more similar on average, and again, men are more dissimilar. If this lends some mixed evidence for hypothesis two, as we see that what is happening is that, okay, we observe some sort of separation when we look at genders, but for example, sometimes it's driven by males being more dissimilar. When we look at the semantic embeddings and the themes, these results are largely insignificant, but two things maybe to highlight here is that when we look at the theme of British mandate, the women tend to be more similar on average, although remember there is very high variability in these estimates. So overall, it seems that most narratives are very similar when we look at through the lens of gender. And when you look at Zionist attacks during and after the Nakba, we again observe like a significant result for male and for women and men stories being more dissimilar than on average. This again brings mixed evidence for hypothesis two. Here is much more, results are much more like broad and variable. So we observe less significance in the estimates. So overall, maybe to summarize, we do find increased cohesion in Nakba survival of life narratives within the same gender, with the asterisk, as we mentioned, sometimes driven by male being more dissimilar, and also within same geographic communities where we observe a very strong effect. So I will pass it to Tam to discuss the meaning of this.
Yeah, so our findings have implications for how we understand Palestinian refugees' collective memory formation. Next slide. So refugees who share the same origin but not the same residence still have cohesive narratives, which demonstrates that group members bond to one another. We're not severed in exile. So this aligns with other scholarship into how diaspora groups remember the past, which has found that diasporic memory is not constrained by spatial boundaries. refugees can participate in group recollection with others from the same origins, even when they're physically separate. Refugees who share the same residence but not the same origin also have cohesive narratives, which shows that the Nakba itself was a catalyst for the formation of new group boundaries. Place of residence impacts group formation because different segments of a diaspora have been known to engage in boundary maintenance and preserve a distinct identity due to self-segregation or social exclusion from the host society, which is certainly the situation for Palestinians in Lebanon who continue to be denied citizenship, legal identity, or work visas. And then sharing the same origin and place of residence is often a strong indicator of similarity, which is consistent with the framework of group memory, which states that groups maintain cohesive memories so long as they're resistant to outside influences. So this shows that the cohesiveness of narratives depends on the continuity of the group, which in turn depends on the continuity of shared space. Next slide, please. And then in terms of gender, women's factual cohesion appears strongest in reference to specific landmarks or entities. This suggests that women's collective memory is shaped by communal domestic practices and survival strategies performed in relation to the land. On the other hand, men's narratives exhibit notable divergence in the description of landmarks, families, and other entities, which suggests that men's experiences are less influenced by communal memory practices and shaped more by personal trajectories and interactions with political and economic systems. Overall, however, regarding gender, there is no single identifier or a stronger similarity or dissimilarity. What this means is that among refugees, there is an overall shared understanding of the Nakba that transcends gender. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the Nakba disrupted geographic, social, and familial ties, but the stories from POHA reveal patterns of shared memory and identity that transcend these ruptures. The integration of computational tools allow us to scale our understanding of these narratives while preserving their richness and depth, honoring the voices who lived through the Nakba and continue the ongoing Palestinian struggle for recognition and liberation. Thank you.
Any question, please? The last paragraph you actually read is a very nice conclusion for that contributes to the goal of the workshop. So, yeah, using computational linguistics to tools, I mean AI tools to scale up this analysis. Okay, we are on time, but if there are questions, we appreciate. Terry, please. You are muted, Terry.
There we go. Thanks very much. That was really interesting. I'd just love to hear a little more about the gender connection and the greater cohesion among women. If there's anything more you can say about that, like where it comes from, how to just like, is there more you can say about that?
In terms of the finding or its implications for how we understand collective memory?
Yeah, the latter.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start, and then David, if there's anything you want to add. So when we were forming our research question, we had a suspicion that gender would be very important in terms of understanding how there are divergences and also cohesion when it comes to remembering specific aspects of the Nakba. And this comes from, there is a large body of smaller scale studies, mostly qualitative methods, one-on-one interviews with refugees, and specifically interviewing women and seeing that within women's groups, and there's a lot of work done by Rosemary Sayegh on this particular topic, where she goes into the different Lebanese refugee groups, and she interviews, and she finds that the women, despite being for decades removed from Palestine, they still maintain a very strong cohesion in their narratives as a group within the refugee camp. So this was something that we went into expecting to see in the data. So I will say that, yeah. And if there's anything, David, you would like to add?
No, and I think that you covered it with sort of like the expectation that we have, which kind of we verify through this more like large scale
Sort of
application.
confirmation at a large scale of something you saw previously at a smaller scale. Great, thank you.